room. Thank you so much. All right, well, welcome in everybody. Welcome to the Innovia Consulting webinar series. We are joined by Galen Norman, application consultant at Innovia Consulting. Today, he's going to be looking at the practical implications for Microsoft's Power Automate. As a quick reminder, if you are requesting CPE or CAE credits, please do ensure that your full name is on your Zoom login so that we may properly assign your certificate. Also, keep in mind that the majority of the polling questions asked by your instructor will need to be answered in order to qualify for those credits. Even if you're not requesting credits, we still want to know your thoughts. Please use that chat to answer, ask, or comment. So we're going to pause here for a few seconds and let everybody get their answers into the chat, and we'll go ahead and count this as our first polling question for CPE and CAE. But what is it that you hope to get out of today's webinar? And there are no right or wrong answers. It could be just learn and earn or whatever that is top of mind for you today. So while those are coming in, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to your instructor and let him get his slides up. I'll read a couple of these out as you're doing that, Galen. It looks like Mary's saying ideas to get started with automating. Adam says learn how to get rid of wasteful tasks. So that gives you kind of a good idea. And I will hand it over to you.
All right. Hello, good morning. Like she said, my name is Galen Norman. I'm an application consultant with Innovia and Team Ignite. We work primarily with Microsoft Business Central, but we also do some of the Power Platform, mostly Power BI. We'll start off the presentation with an introduction to the Power Platform. Let me see here. Why it's not there? It is. Because so often the term Power Platform is used synonymously with the names of its components, I like to include a summary of the pillars to show they're independent entities under a common umbrella. After discussing the separate parts of the Power Platform, we'll dive into an explanation of Power Automate, the connectors used to enhance business processes, the components of a workflow, and the requirements to use Power Automate. Then we'll look at some use cases for Power Automate. Finally, give a demonstration of how to create and test a Power Automate flow. I'll show a flow created from a template as well as a flow created from scratch. And to close out, we'll wrap up the presentation with a quick recap. This is the first question for credit. How many of you have ever attended an Innovia webinar or workshop? Moving forward. Without further ado, let's dive into it. Like I said in the introduction, we're going to start the explanation of Power Automate with a brief explanation of the Power Platform. The Microsoft Power Platform is a collection of powerful business tools developed by Microsoft that enables developers and non-developers alike to create customized business solutions across their organizations. It empowers team members to build their own business solutions and simplify the process of building them. The 5 pillars of the Power Platform are Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and Power Pages. The most important takeaway from this explanation is that it allows team members to build their own solutions. Many companies staff dedicated software developers to create and edit their computer programs. Microsoft enables anyone to become a citizen developer using the Power Platform because of the simplicity of the model. You'll be able to see that in the explanation of the pillars of the Power Platform to follow. Power BI is a business analytics tool that enables users to create and share reports and dashboards that use creative illustrations and charts called visualizations to communicate business data. Power BI is a collection of software services, apps, and connectors that work together to turn unrelated sources of data into coherent, visually immersive, and interactive insight. Likely, if you've heard anything about the Power Platform, it's probably been Power BI. Power BI is Microsoft's flagship business intelligence program. Power Apps is an application development tool that allows a user to build and share custom apps with low code or no coding required. The 2 types of Power Apps are Canvas apps and model-driven apps. Power Apps democratizes app creation, allowing anyone with a license to do something that was once limited to experienced professionals with advanced certifications and coding experience. With a few hours of learning from Microsoft, anyone can build a usable and presentation-worthy application for their business or personal use. Power Automate is a low-code tool that allows for automation of repetitive business processes. We'll cover Power Automate in great detail throughout this presentation. And Power Virtual Agents is a chatbot tool that enables a user to build and share logic-based chatbots for both internal and external use. Power Virtual Agents eliminates the gap between the subject matter experts and the development teams building the bots, and the long latency between teams recognizing an issue and updating the bot to address it. Power Pages allows a user to create low-code business websites. Power Pages is the newest pillar of the Power Platform, having previously been called Power Portals, which used to be a third type of Power App. Dataverse is Microsoft's built-in data source. Dataverse is not a separate pillar of the Power Platform. Instead, if it functions as a data source and management service, where a company can build and link data through tables through relationship management. All of the pillars of the Power Platform can access Dataverse. Now that we understand the Power Platform, what is Power Automate? There's a question for credit before I get into Power Automate. How many of you used the Power Platform previously? Power Automate is an online workflow service. Power Automate helps users to automate repetitive business processes by connecting various online programs and creating automated steps that can be taken without manual intervention. For example, if you want to send an automated email based on a tweet on Twitter, or set a reminder in Outlook based on the creation of a new file in SharePoint, Power Automate can help you do this. In 2016, Microsoft released Microsoft Flow, which was an improvement and replacement for SharePoint Designer workflow. In 2019, Microsoft renamed Microsoft Flow to Microsoft Power Automate, which became the third pillar of the newly created Power Platform. Power Automate functions based on online connectors to individual programs. It can currently connect to more than 500 online programs. Those 500 connectors include programs I'm sure you've either used or seen before. Microsoft 365, previously called Microsoft Office Suite, including Outlook, both the desktop and web app, OneDrive for Business, OneNote, and others. Google apps such as Google Calendar, Google Drive, and Google Sheets. Communication tools such as Microsoft Teams and GoToMeeting. And social media apps such as Twitter and LinkedIn. Additionally, Power Automate connects to the other pillars of the Power Platform. Most of the connectors available for Power Automate are standard connectors, which means that there isn't any additional cost or license required to use them. However, some are premium connectors, which means they do come with additional costs and licensing requirements. A complete list of Power Automate compatible connectors can be found at powerautomate.microsoft.com. If there's still a connector you can't find, you have the option to create a custom connector with the help of a Power Platform developer. You can then publish this connector to the connector library at powerautomate.microsoft.com for others to use later. Power Automate's base component is the flow. A flow at its core is an if-then statement. A flow is made up of two parts: triggers, which determine what starts a flow. This is the if of the if-then statement. And actions, which determine what the flow does. This is the then of the if-then statement. There are 4 types of triggers in Power Automate. The first trigger is automated. Automated triggers take effect automatically in response to stimulus other than manual entry. For example, when a new team is created on Microsoft Teams, or a file is modified in SharePoint. Automated triggers are the most common triggers. The second trigger type is scheduled. You can set up a trigger to send a reminder email every day at a certain time, or send a customer statement once a month. These triggers include the process set to take place, as well as the interval recurrence. Another type of trigger is instant. Instant triggers generally take the form of buttons, either within Power Automate, which require a user to log into Power Automate to initiate, or more commonly programmed into Microsoft and third-party programs, which allow manual triggering of a flow. I've included an example here of how Power Automate can be accessed directly from Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. The last type of trigger is a business process trigger, also called a desktop flow. This trigger is a sort of hybrid between automated and instant triggers. This type of trigger requires a human to push a button of some sort that transitions them from one step in a process to another. For instance, if a sales order entry requires navigation between multiple pages in different programs, a user can click a next button to move to the next step without needing to navigate there manually. While there are only 3 basic types of triggers, the number of actions available is based on the program being used. For instance, connecting to Outlook allows a user to choose send an email or create a reminder as actions, while connecting to Twitter allows a user to retweet another user. These actions can also have multiple levels. As shown in the example here, this flow has only one action track. This flow is a simple approval request that sends an email to a manager for approval. Most often, however, you'll see and create flows with multiple options at each level. The example shown here is that kind of flow. This is an approval flow that requires management approval for release of orders over a certain dollar amount. As you can see, this flow has multiple decisions nested within it. So the flow has to travel a complete circuit before ending with a definite yes or no answer. If the approval is denied, the approval ends with a no or rejected answer. If the approval is approved but under $10,000, the flow ends with a yes or approved answer. There would likely be an additional level of approval under the vice president approval level, but this is just an example. These flows can be as detailed and intricate as a business requires, with several levels of approvals throughout. Now that we've talked about the definition and components of Power Automate, let's talk about Power Automate in action with some use cases. The first example I'll explain is file monitoring. How often have you gone looking for a file in a shared location, like a SharePoint list, only to find it either missing or completely modified? Power Automate has an answer for that. With Power Automate, you can create a trigger that, like anytime a file in a particular folder gets changed or deleted, anytime a folder reaches a certain file capacity, or anytime a particular user attempts to access a particular file or folder. These actions can trigger a notification or an approval workflow, so you'll know who's accessing or changing what files, or you can stop them from doing so. Think of it as a file guard dog. Another example of Power Automate in action is expense approval. In a large company with numerous staff members who work in the field and incur expenses regularly, the expense approval process is a tedious system of hierarchies and policies. In many companies, expense approval requires managers to take time from their busy schedules to sift through lines on a spreadsheet and verify that the receipts provided match the reports. At times, employees forget to attach receipts to their expense reports, or the amounts on the receipts don't match the expenses on the report. Power Automate, in conjunction with a Power App Canvas app, can help read and verify the receipt when it is attached to the report. Additionally, if a report is submitted without a receipt, a trigger in Power Automate can return the report to the user for additional detail before it even gets to the manager's inbox. Let's say that employee did everything correctly, though, from attaching receipts to matching amounts and timely submittal. What about small expenses like an office supply expense or lunch while traveling that doesn't go over a certain amount? If the company allows for these kinds of minor expenses, should a manager have to review each and every one of them? The manager can set up a flow in Power Automate so that these minor expenses, as long as they match the receipts and don't exceed a certain company approved threshold, get automatically approved without needing to be reviewed. Business analytics response is another key use of Power Automate flows. Business managers and owners thrive on data. Data drives their decision making, and different business analytics reports give them quick snapshots of the status of what could be a very large organization. As I discussed previously, Power BI is Microsoft's flagship business intelligence program, and you can use Power Automate to generate certain reports to repeat at a certain interval. So, for example, if a CFO can set up a flow to email a company's balance sheet and FP&A to ownership and management every morning so they are prepared for the day's activities. A warehouse manager can have an inventory report run automatically at the beginning and end of each day to get an idea of what product moved that day. Additionally, Power Automate can run flows based on other triggers. For example, if a company has a certain productivity goal every day, Power Automate can send emails to management as soon as that goal has been met for the day. Power Automate can also notify management of if a certain low threshold's been met. For instance, if inventory on a certain product has fallen below a certain level, Power Automate can notify the warehouse manager to reorder it. Or if a company's ordering system is automated, Power Automate could even place that order to replenish the low inventory. My last example of Power Automate in action is automated HR. Well-run companies generally have organized onboarding and other human resources related processes. Unfortunately, many of these processes are repetitive because there is usually certain data that HR needs to maintain in more than one location. For instance, in onboarding, a new hire's name and pertinent contact information needs to be put into the company's employees record database, government documents that the company needs to send out and of which they need to maintain copies, and even some personalized software licensing. Power Automate can help identify duplicate fields between these processes and fill in some of the repeating information, like name and contact information. An HR manager can even create a trigger that whenever one of these forms is filled out for a new hire, an email is sent out to the company welcoming them. For the second question for credit, are there any use cases you can think of that could use Power Automate other than the examples provided? So what do you need to use Power Automate? The requirements are pretty simple. You need a license. The license costs $15 per user per month. The license entitles a user to unlimited flow runs, 250 megabytes of database storage, and 2 gigabytes of file capacity. In addition to Power Automate license, a user would also need access or additional licensure to connectors utilized by their flows. After a company gets a license and access to Power Automate, at least one user will be needed to be designated an administrator. That user will use the Power Platform Admin Center to set up other users, permissions, and environments. An environment is a space to store, manage, and share a company's business data, apps, and flows. All work performed on any of the pillars of the Power Platform is done within an environment. So prior to doing any work in the Power Platform, at least one environment needs to be set up in the Admin Center. Depending on the size or complexity of the company, your company may have more than one environment or only one. Many companies use one environment as what Microsoft calls a sandbox, where users can develop, test apps and flows, and after their work is ready for deployment to users, they export their app or flow from the sandbox environment and import it into their production environment. This is a very common model for Microsoft users, but it's important to know that the best approach is the one that works best for your company. And now we'll move over to the demonstration. Guys here. All right. So we are going to start with powerautomate.microsoft.com is where you're going to start. Two things to note. Microsoft wants you to learn and succeed. So they put learning all over all of their products. As you see here, you have take a guided tour. There's more information. Scroll down the page. There's examples of how you can automate and even use cases from companies that use Power Automate. I'm going to sign in. And I apologize, my focus went over here. My camera's over here, but my main screen is over here. So once you sign into Power Automate, this is assuming you have an environment set up. You're going to be at what's called the Power Automate Studio. So the first thing we'll look at is the top right corner. If you look in here, this is where my environments are. I have access to all these different environments. I'm going to be working in the Team Empower default settings. So the first setting is the admin center. That'll take you to the Power Platform admin center, like I talked about before. The Power Automate settings specifically and licenses related to the Power Platform. And the rest of this is kind of general Microsoft settings. Like I said before, Microsoft wants you to succeed. So you got all kinds of helpful information here related to Power Automate. The second thing is the AI Copilot. We're not going to get into this. AI it could be a workshop on its own, so I'm not gonna get into AI during this session. Just know that this is here. And then learning, again, learning sessions here, additional learning information related to Power Automate. It takes up the majority of this page. Next, we'll go to the navigation pane. So you click on home, it's going to take you back to the main studio. You click into create, you'll see that you have flows related to the triggers that we discussed during the presentation. There's a couple of them we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about process mining or the describe this as the AI related, but the other flows are here. Again, you also have templates. So if you see a template you want to use, you can grab it from right here. If you don't see a template you want to use and you want to search for it, you can search for it right here. So I'm going to use Teams, for Microsoft Teams. And notice as soon as I hit enter, it's going to move me to the templates page. So yeah, that's what that does here. It's already filtered to Teams, and here's all the Teams related templates. And we're going to come back here after we finish the rest of the navigation. So again, learn. Microsoft wants you to succeed. They want you to learn. They want you to have success. This takes you to learn.microsoft.com and filters it straight down to Power Automate. We're not going to spend a lot of time there, but just know that that's there. My flows, these are all of the flows that I have associated with my account or that I am allowed to use. I can create a new flow from here as well. I generally do it from create, or I can import flows from the outside. Approvals. This is for approval workflows. I can approve or reject approvals directly from here that are sent to me. You see here, approve and deny, or reject, I'm sorry. And then connections. These are all of the softwares that I am currently connected to from my Power Automate license. So I'm currently connected to all of these. If you want to add a connection, you can add it from here, or you can add it directly from the flow itself. Lastly, you got Ask a Chatbot. Even within their own program, Microsoft has embedded examples of their own product. Here you can use a Microsoft Power Virtual Agent within Power Automate to ask questions about Power Automate. So I'm going to create a new flow now. So I'm going to go back to create. And I'm actually going to go to templates. I'm sorry. The use cases, I've been having issues with my own Teams notifications. I don't know why, but for some reason, I don't get notified correctly when when somebody adds a message to one of my team channels. So I'm going to set up a Power Automate flow for it. So I typed in Teams, and that's the first message that came up. Send an email when a new message is added in Microsoft Teams. When you click on a template, it's going to pull up all of the connectors related to that template up here, and it's going to ask you to sign in if you haven't already been signed in. Because I'm already signed in, I'm good to go. So I'm going to click continue. And now it's created the skeleton of a flow. I just need to put in my information at this point. My first step always, though, is I want to rename the flow. Otherwise, this is going to be the name and it's not real descriptive of what you created. So I'm going to say Galen Norman 10, and I'll know when I'm looking at this flow that that's what it is. So this is the trigger. This is the if. This is the action. It's the then. When you click on these little 3 dots, you can rename this. So right now, this step is named when a new channel message is added. I can change that to whatever I want. I'm going to leave it for this example because it's pretty simple. And I can rotate between my connections. I'm going to use my @Northern-Lights. That's just an internal email account. So when I get into the team that I want is this Power Platform Testing General team. So Power Platform General. And what I want the email to come to me. You can specify whoever you want here. Just understand you do have to specify people. You can't user groups or anything like that don't currently work for that. So there's my email. It says new message. This is going to be the subject of the email. And in here is what's called dynamic content. Dynamic content consists of variables produced by triggers and actions. So for example, the dynamic content displayed in this email will be based on the data provided in the Teams channel message. So for instance, the message from, this is going to display the user who created the message. The importance is the importance marked on the message, and then whatever the information was in the body. So right now, this is good to go. This is set up. It is complete, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. There should be a green bar pop up here. There it is. It's going to say, I recommend you test it. So I'm going to go ahead and test it manually. And when I test it, now Power Automate is going to be looking for this trigger. You can, in theory, you can run the flow without testing it, but I like to test it like that because instead of it just populating every so often as Power Automate's looking for it, it's actively looking for it instead of just once an hour or once every 10 minutes. So hello team to work done. So now I'm going to go back to my flow. The flow is running. Message was created. We have a little green mark right here. Flow ran successfully. We have a green check mark right here. So I should be able to go to my Outlook. I apologize. I wasn't signed in ahead of time. While this is signing in, I'll come back to that to show you the email. But I'm going to come back to flows and I'm going to go into this flow. When I go into this flow, you have this main screen here. The parts of this main screen, the most important first is you have the control bar up here. The buttons up here allow you to edit, delete, export, turn your flow on and off, and more. The details section of this page shows general information about your flow, what it is, what it does, who made it, etc. The connections box up here show all the programs your flow uses and the licenses being used for it. The run history is generally the most useful information on the page. This page shows when the flow was run, how long the flow took to run, and the results. If your flow is being used frequently by a large number of users, you can manually refresh this pane without needing to refresh the page to see updated information about the flows. The process mining pane shows the average time it took to run your flow. This flow is very simple with only a single action, so it takes a very short time to run. But if your flow has multiple levels with multiple approval levels or even multiple applications, this is a good indicator of the health of your flow. And finally, the flow checker opens a pane that shows errors and warnings related to your flow. Errors are issues that are preventing your flow from completing successfully, and warnings are potential issues with your flow that won't necessarily prevent it from running, but they could be indicators that there are other issues with your flow. For instance, if your flow is supposed to run every day at a certain time and you get a warning that your flow hasn't run in 30 days, that could be a good indicator that something could be wrong with your flow and you need to diagnose it. So let's go back to Outlook, sign in. Didn't like my sign in. I'm not sure why. Oh, there it is. And there is my email. There's my email from Teams. Just to show you how quickly it does work though. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test it again. Just to show you how quick this works. So I'm going to test it, run over to Teams real quick. Ran successfully, and the little ding was my email. There it is. Generally speaking, this kind of flow works very quickly. So I'm going to do another flow now, and I'm going to create it from scratch. And it's going to be a scheduled flow. I'm going to come here and do a scheduled flow. There will be a screen here that you can use to set up your flow. All the information in here. You can set up now or you can set up manually later, but I'm going to set it up now. And as you can see, I've been drinking water. I usually need a reminder for it. So I'm going to call this flow drink water. And I'm going to make sure that every single hour of the day, I'm going to get a notification. I'm going to get an email that says, you need to start drinking water, sir. I'm going to have it starting at 12:45 because that's what time it is here. It's 12:35. I'm going to have it 12:45 and have it run every hour. So like I said, it's what it started. And here's the interval recurrence. So I'm going to create it. Now you see, I don't have to rename this flow because I already named it in the previous page and it already set up my trigger for me. If you notice here, the start time, this is in Greenwich Mean Time. So if you want to change this at all, you have to make sure that you're, you know how to calculate that and everything. I would usually have to look it up, but now I know I set it for 12:45. It's 17:45. I know what it is. So what do I want to do? I'm going to add a step, and this is going to be the action. So right here, I can either search for the connector, or I can search for the action, or I can search for a combination of the two. So I'm going to look for Outlook, and I'm going to look for email. Send an email. There it is. Perfect. So where do I want to send it? I want to send it to my G. Norman at Northern Lights. Water. Now, you'll see here there's dynamic content, but it says no dynamic content's available. The reason for that, this trigger isn't pulling any information. It's not creating anything. It's not bringing anything in. It's just a standalone trigger. And dynamic content is based on triggers or actions. So if there was another action in here somewhere, it could potentially bring information from there, but this can't. So get up, go to the cooler with and drink water. As you see here, you can put some HTML formatting into this. You can put a link. This can be as fancy dancy as you want it to be. This is going to be very simple for our purposes, though. I'm going to save it. So now I'm going to go ahead and test it. And now you'll see there's another option now to test it. It says run flow. The reason for that is this is one that is done manually or at a time. There's no external business process or stimulus or anything to cause it. It's set at a certain time or by manual input. So I'm going to run the flow. My flow ran successfully, so I should hear a ding. Oh, shoot. Let's discard the message. So now I know that if I push a button within Power Automate, this flow is going to run. Well, what if I want to test the time? I'm going to go into that, I'm going to go back to edit. I'm going to go into that time here, that Greenwich Mean Time, and I'm going to save it for 1740 because it's about to be 1240 my time. And at 1240, it should send an email. This tests the ability to react to the time. So we're going to give it just a moment. And I didn't say it ahead of time, but I think I'm going to run over a little bit. If anybody needs to drop, I apologize. There's just so much to this process, and it's a lot of fun. So I put a lot of information into it. There it is. $12.38 and $12.40. So that is a scheduled flow. Now I'm going to do an approval flow. So this approval flow is going to use an automated flow. And the example is, let's say your company uses a SharePoint list to request and approve vacation. So for instance, in a pending list, let's say I want vacation, I'm going to put my name into this list, and then a manager is either going to move it to approved or rejected, based on, whatever that manager uses to approve it. That's a manual process. What if I want it to happen automatic? So I'm going to start first off with my 3 lists and make sure all the columns are the same. Oh, and here's a example of my testing. I apologize. So I'm going to start an automated flow, and instead of setting it up this way, I'm going to skip this and I'm going to set it up myself manually. You see it's untitled, vacation request. And I want the trigger to be whenever somebody adds their name to that list. So whenever an item is created in SharePoint. So I'm going to search for SharePoint, but I'm also going to search for item. So when an item is created, perfect. There's my trigger. And you'll see here, this wants different information than the team one did. So again, I'm going to go into that Power Automate testing, and I want it to pull from pending. So that's all the information I need here. This is my trigger. We're good. So once that happens, what do we want to do? We want to trigger an approval flow. So I'm going to search for approval. And here it is. So there's 4 options you can choose. This one is usually the one that I use, start and wait for an approval. That means that this is going to trigger the approval, and it's not going to let anything else happen until somebody is approved or rejected it. Start and wait for an approval of text, again, same thing, but it's text related. Create an approval will create it, but it won't give any outputs or anything. It allows you to separate the steps, and then wait for an approval is the end of that create step. So basically this is this together. So create an approval. There's 4 kinds of approvals. One is approve, reject, everyone must approve. So if you send it to 5 people, everyone has to approve it. Approve or reject first. So if you send it to 5 person, one individual can approve it. And the custom has some conditional formatting I'm not going to get into. So I'm going to do that. So now it's going to send an approval either to, it's going to send it to Teams, and it's going to send it via email. The title of the approval is going to be here, and you can use dynamic content. Where's the dynamic content coming from? It's going to come from this item that was created. So I'm going to use title, first name, last name, vacation requests, so that this manager doesn't have to go looking for who that was. And in this case, I'm going to send it to me. You can use dynamic content like that. If that person's supervisor or something like that is set up somewhere, you can use it there. But otherwise, I'm just going to hard code it to me. And now, once the approval is set up, great. We need it to do something. So what it needs to do is a condition. And as you see, if I click on this condition here, it splits. So it determines, okay, if it gets approved, what's it going to do? So the condition is going to be dynamic content pulling from this outcome. And you see outcome is listed right there. What's important here is, yeah, you can put dynamic content, but really what this is going to do, you want to put approve. The reason for that is when the approval request goes to the supervisor, they're going to get an approval that says approve or reject, not approved, rejected. It's approve, reject. You have to make sure those words match. If they don't match, your flow is going to be broken. So if it gets approved, what do we want to do? We want to come down to the yes branch here. Power Automate doesn't necessarily pick things up and moves them. It, at least right now, it copies them. So what we're going to do is we want to copy this item. So I'm going to I'm going to use the SharePoint connector, and I'm going to say get item because I want to get this information. So get item, and items is not, it's item. And I want to get it again from that Power Automate pending list. Now this is dynamic content. This ID is pulling from the ID related to this item. And now I want to create another item in the approved list. So create. So again, Power Automate. And I want it in approved. Now it's going to pull. Yep, there it is. So this information, this title, first and last name, is going to come from this item up here. So title, or is from this item because this pulled from here. So title, first name, oops, sorry, last name, done. So now that's good. So now it's going to move over and we're good to go. So what about no? So we want to get an item again. SharePoint, share, not SharePoint. Get item. Now, this is where the renaming of steps comes in handy. So we see get item over here, get item 2. We don't want that. That's confusing. So I'm going to rename this to get item yes. Same thing for create item. Yes. I'm going to rename this one too. no. So that if it's referenced anywhere else in this flow, I know exactly what it is. So we're gonna Power Automate testing. We're gonna get it. We're still getting it from here because we haven't put it anywhere yet. And again, the ID is from when an item is created. And we're going to create an item again. SharePoint, create item. Create item. Again, we're going to rename it to no. And this time we're going to create it in the rejected list. And again, this title, this is where this comes in handy. So if we look here, you have get item no. That's where we want it from. Or when an item is created title, we could theoretically use that. But there's another one. It should be on here. Starting at, yeah, there's other titles to use, but basically we want to make sure it's coming from this step. Title, get item no, perfect. First name, get item no, get item no, last name. So perfect. So now we have the ability to create items in each of those lists. What about the list in the item in the pending list? Let's get rid of it. It's independent of either of these steps. We can either do it in both of them, or we can say this step is complete. Let's make a new one. Now it's going to be SharePoint delete item. There it is. Now we're going to delete it from this one. So Power Platform testing, it's going to delete from the pending list. And the ID, now this is important. We don't want any of these yeses or nos. We want the original one. So what this flow is doing is it's getting the item that was created in SharePoint, starting an approval workflow. The approval is going to be yes or no. If it's yes, it's going to make copy that item over to the approved list. If not, it's going to copy it over to the rejected list. And at the end, we're going to delete it from the pending list. So we're going to click save. And we're going to test it. So I'm going to come over here to SharePoint and pending. So I'm going to make a new one. And I kind of gave it away, but I saw Hamilton again this weekend. So I'm going to use. He never took vacation, but he wants a vacation. So I'm going to give it to him too. I think he deserves it. So now what we're going to see here is the flow is running. I created an item successfully. Now it's pushed over for an approval. Yep. Now it's waiting for an approval. So if I go over here to Teams, Secretary Hamilton asked for approval for vacation. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. So now it ran successfully. So if we refresh this list, there's nothing in pending, and he got his vacation approved. So what about rejected? Let's make sure it works. So it's testing. I'm going to do this. We already saw this. Aaron for no, he didn't work hard enough. We're not going to approve his vacation. We're still going to come over here and watch the flow in action. There it is, waiting for my approval. Aaron Burr request. I'm going to reject it. Boom, boom. And it ran successfully. So if we come over here to the pending list, now he's in rejected. So that is how an approval workflow works. You can add all kinds of stuff. You can add an email action in here that whenever if you send a rejection or an approval or rejection, whatever, it'll notify whoever created it. Just for simplicity, I didn't do that this time. Now, for my emails, you want to see, so we got this is what it looks like here as well. And it's already been completed, so it's not going to let me do it again. So that is the demonstration. So just to recap, Power Automate is an online workflow service that helps users to automate repetitive business processes by connecting to various online programs and creating automated steps that can be taken without manual intervention. It uses a variety of programs, Microsoft and otherwise, using data connectors. The base functional unit of a Power Automate flow and our flows are made up of triggers and actions. And with a premium license and all requisite connectors, a user can create and use flows in their business process. And I thought I had a third question in there. Let me throw in another one because I didn't use one. Another question for credit is, what do you think a good example of a business process or work or desktop workflow would be? And with that, that is the end of my slideshow.
Thank you, Galen. We did have one question. I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead and answer that really quick before I close us out. How long, Foster is asking, how long can a flow be waiting for an approval?
It can wait indefinitely. So if somebody's out on vacation and waiting for an approval for that, it can just sit there and wait until somebody uses it. But that's where you're going to want to have more than one approver generally, for depending on the process. And using the first to respond instead of everybody responding.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. All right, so I wanted to thank everybody for being here, whether live or if you're viewing the on-demand recording. Also, thank you, Galen, for such an amazing presentation and demonstration. Please use that QR code to view the Enovia site for a plethora of offerings. This includes workshops that you can sign up for a deeper dive, conferences, case studies, and other various webinar resources that they have. If you're new to Business Central and wanting to learn more, the Enovia Conversation podcast is also a must-have resource. Again, I wanted to thank everybody for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. And with that, I will let you guys go ahead and go on with your day. If you'd like to stay after to ask Galen anything, please feel free to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.